a professor emeritus in the School of Education at Iowa State University. So as Jack would say, I'm one of those weird partners from the School of Education. And I've spent over 3 decades, almost 4, doing community engagement work. And learned partway through my career that really when you're employed at a university, you can be engaged in the community and that's okay, but until you turn it into scholarship, why would it be part of a university? And so I think that's part of what we will add with this panel to the great discussion so far this morning, is what is that engagement scholarship that is key to helping us make sure we make a difference in communities. So we've got a wonderful set of things again in this period, so you'll find that you're not going to be able to catch up on your nap that you'd hoped you were going to get this morning. What I'm going to do is first share a couple of resources with you. There is a table back there that I put a number of artifacts on from the Engagement Scholarship Consortium's conference that took place 2 years ago. I'm sorry, 2 weeks ago. That group has started a long number of years ago to help institutionalize engagement scholarship as an important aspect of what universities and colleges are doing to make a difference in communities. Not too much different than broader impacts, but actually started with Boyer's work in about 1990 and a first conference in 1996 that I was at in Madison. So I think we will tie together for you this companionable relationship between broader impacts and engagement scholarship and what that means for making a difference in the world. So at the back table there you will find some things about a couple of journals for engagement scholarship. In particular, you also received the Points of Distinction publication when you came in, and that will be referred to later. For those of you who asked how do we measure broader impacts quantitatively and qualitatively, you will find some of the answers in here. You will also receive, when you get home to the address you gave us to register, a copy of the Journal of Community Engagement and Scholarship. Hi, Fitzgerald, who's to my left, and I are both on the editorial board for that journal, and they've agreed to send you each a free copy so that you get a chance to see one venue for publishing. What I love about this journal is it also privileges not just the academic voice, but the community partner's voice. And so you will actually see publication from community members. In fact, there's one in this issue that I think is one you'll receive. That's a director of an AIDS education organization. So what I want to do first is just share a little follow-up to what the panel said this morning. One of my research lines is to measure and monitor community engagement for academic and community partners. So as you can imagine, someone said it's a growing industry to be an evaluator. I could give all my time to being an evaluator to measuring and monitoring engagement projects. And what I've discovered is in one line of research that I've done is talking to faculty. So from a faculty perspective, why do faculty members want to be engaged with communities? You heard a lot of the pieces already this morning. And there's a brief handout in your packet on the right-hand side, which you'll find where most of our resources are for you for this panel. And there's a definition of what community engagement is from the Academy of Community Engagement Scholarship, and just a summary of the things that I have found from that research. And you will find it's very similar to what you heard from the panel this morning. But what I want to share with you briefly as my piece, and then I'll turn it over to our main speaker, is that we are changing definitions of this work as we go in the movement. And so this morning, every time I heard someone say the word outreach, I kind of went like this. That's a term we used in the engagement scholarship world until maybe about 5 years ago, and now it's turned to the term engagement. So if you'd like to get a little more background on how the definitions have changed, there is an article in your packet on the right-hand side called Tips for Constructing a Promotion and Tenure Dossier that Documents Engaged Scholarship Endeavors. And on the third page, which in that journal is actually page 17, I have a matrix that I created when I attended the University Academy, or the Engagement Academy for University Leaders at Virginia Tech. And it helped me differentiate between all of these pieces. And our speaker will give you some more differentiations as well. But in this matrix, there are two axes. One is engagement, and the other is scholarship. And if you are low on engagement and you are low on scholarship, it's simply service. And some of the kinds of examples you would have there would be one-way expert presentations to groups. And we saw a lot of that this morning. A lot of what people were calling public engagement was going out and as an expert sharing our science. internal committees, professional associations, etc. Some people may even these days call service outreach. Sometimes you will find that at universities, a one-way delivery of information as experts into a community. If you are low on engagement and high on scholarship, we're probably seeing what we would traditionally call scholarship in many places. Original intellectual work, it's communicated and it's validated by peers. That often tends to be the basic boundaries or definition we give to that. If we're high on engagement and we're low on scholarship, then you're seeing what the Carnegie Foundation would call mutual benefit for the public and academia, an exchange of knowledge and resources that's reciprocal between those partners, and a reciprocal partnership. No one partner has more power or prestige than another in what you're doing. So that would be engagement. But there's no scholarship there. There's simply activity going on where we do things together. We're working with each other, not to or for each other, but with each other. But if you are high on scholarship and you are high on engagement and that is integrated, then you have engagement scholarship. And you're using the principles from both of those. So that's the base foundational definitions I use in this day and age of engagement scholarship. And that may or may not be helpful to you in your environment. There are all these environmental constraints that help us use the terms and definitions that we do. So that's a piece that I thought you might find valuable. I shared that with some of you earlier and would be glad to chat more about that. But I'd like us to spend the vast majority of our time with our main speaker, Dr. Hiram Fitzgerald from Michigan State University, and he's the Associate Provost for University Outreach and Engagement, so see, he gets to have both terms. He gets to do it all. He's also a distinguished professor in the Department of Psychology at Michigan State, and I consider Michigan State the lead example of best practices in engagement and engagement scholarship. So I was really pleased that he was able to join us. And so I'll just let Hi go ahead and get started. He's got Engaged Scholarship 101 for us, and you will find his presentation in a larger form on the website. Many more slides and resources for you. But Hi, go ahead and get us started.
Thanks, Nancy. A couple of caveats. First is thank goodness that my colleagues at the University of Missouri have MU instead of UM, because U of M is sort of, you know, and I'm going to be there next Tuesday at your campus, so that's going to be a delight. Second is that at Michigan State University, our faculty are asked to do three things: teach, do research, and provide service. We do not have a fourth anything. If your research is engaged research, it's engaged research. If your teaching is engaged teaching, instead of what we're doing here, lecturing, which is not engagement, then it's engaged teaching. If your service is engaging communities in ways that you evaluate the impact of your service, then it's scholarly based. If it's just service, it's just service. If you're a bench scientist and you're doing great work there, that's great. We have a lot of those on our campus. We have 3,750 faculty in our database on a measurement tool we use annually who do engaged research, engaged teaching, or engaged service. The vast majority of those 3,700 faculty and academic staff are doing engaged research. That means you're working in communities trying to solve problems that are disciplinary focused, theory driven, but have sustainable outcomes for the people in the community that are working with you to solve their problems. Okay, so that's a framework for what you're going to hear. So everybody's sort of saying how you started, so I'll do that. I wasn't going to do that, but I will. When I came to Michigan State University 48 years ago, it was as a developmental psychologist focusing on psychophysiological studies of babies' nervous systems the first 6 months postnatal, contrasting how babies began to hook things together in the autonomic and somatically mediated systems that enabled them to eventually behave in particular kind of ways. That graduated over the next 20 years into studies of interhemispheric specialization of function and communication. Increasingly over that 20-year period of being a lab scientist, my life experiences as a scholar, mostly initiated by the World Health Organization and the Pan American Health Organization, took me more and more out into the world. And as I went out into the world, I got increasingly concerned that perhaps what we were learning in our lab was not as directly connected to the lives of people as it needed to be. And so in the 1990s, I started an interdisciplinary graduate program in applied developmental science, fully extramurally funded, involved 12 departments on campus, generally around 20 or 30 graduate students. And we ran that whole thing using community-based research as the focus of the way we interacted with mostly families with very young kids. 2002, to give you a sense of where MSU is at with respect to all this, the person who had been provost at our university for 11 years, Luana Simon, decided to change the focus of the office I hold now, which was continuing education, into what we then called applied developmental science, now called community engagement scholarship. And the 10 years she's been our president, we've been working to craft the full alignment of our institution with community engagement scholarship. So this is not a fourth thing of anything we do. It is implicit in our mission that anybody who comes to our institution who wishes to do their research, teaching, and service off of our campus somewhere, working with people in communities, are doing what you're all talking about as broader impacts. Now, I'm going to frame this in the context of broader impacts, but it's really about what we do at our institution all the time. How many are Carnegie classified volunteer? Yeah, probably a lot of them. I looked at the list of people before I came to the institutions. So that's their definition. Their definition was actually developed on the basis of the Big Ten's definition, which is underneath it. That whole thing is actually part of the Carnegie definition. Amy Driscoll focuses on that. At NERCHI, where now all applications are reviewed, John Saltmarsh uses the whole definition. And note, to enrich scholarship, research, and creative activity. That's the purpose of engagement. We are universities or colleges. We're not departments of social service. We're not departments of state. We deal with scholarship. Okay? That's why it's not a fourth thing at Michigan State University. It's not a fourth thing at the 33 member institutions, mostly, who are part of the Engagement Scholarship Consortium. Okay? 4 characteristics. All that stuff boils down to 4 things. What we do is scholarly. It cuts across the mission. It's reciprocal and mutually beneficial. I can succeed as a scholar because I do good, rigorous work in communities. Communities benefit because we do good, rigorous work in communities working with them. So there's knowledge transfer all along the way, both directions. And that is based on the values of a democracy. So here are some examples. Use-inspired basic research, which is the kind of research that mostly NSF funds. Think of Louis Pasteur, okay, as opposed to Niels Bohr, which is basic science, science for science sake, like art for art's sake. Use-inspired basic research, community-based participatory research, applied research, action research, all those kinds of ways of doing research. Contractual things, hit the wrong button. I do that. Okay. Engaged online, engaged teaching learning. The most difficult part of the engaged teaching learning, I mean, flip classrooms around now, active learning process. You're going to go through a little exercise a little later where you're doing active learning and exchanging information and communicating with each other. Online instruction is probably the biggest challenge to higher education now. How do you do engaged learning in an online kind of situation? So a lot of folks are working on that kind of concept. Ye's service. Note that all of these activities mean that someone has come to somebody in the institution based on their knowledge, not their good deeds as a member of a civil society. We all should be participating in those kinds of activities as citizens. There, somebody comes to me for technical assistance, I assume they think I know something based on scholarship, right? So these are all scholarly anchored activities. The goal, this is our version of Ernie Boyer's Scholarship of Integration. If I have people, if I'm doing research in community and I have graduate students and undergraduate students involved with it through one of these kind of processes, then teaching is taking place because I'm transferring my knowledge to the community. The community is transferring their knowledge to me. I mean, look at me. We do a lot of research in Detroit. Most people in Detroit don't look like me. And I know nothing about the lives of the people in the neighborhoods of Detroit, how their day in, day out life is. They have to teach me that. You'll see some other examples later on. And that informs the kind of questions I ask and the kind of methods that we work together to use in order to answer the questions that are of interest to me and of interest to the community. That's a little one-pager on your points of distinction book that I was surprised to see here, but somebody must have contacted one of my staff. Okay, so now I'm going to frame some things and just give some examples within the context of 5 indicators of broader impacts. Believe me, I could throw those 5 slides out. There are 5 slides that are just headings. I could throw them out and just give the same talk. Okay? If you fully integrate what we're talking about as part of institutional mission and institutional infrastructure support, you don't need to talk about, well, how do we do translational science? How do we do broader impacts? And you'll see some examples of this. If we're going to do broader impacts, we're going to start with our students. One of the reasons why we all work where we work is they're called students. The other point I want to make, because of something was said earlier, every single penny at Michigan State University's $2.3 billion annual budget comes from the public. Okay? A small portion, increasingly, of our budget comes from state legislatures. But every penny in our institution comes from a student, a parent, a business, a federal agency. That's our money, folks. So that's public support for what we do. Every single penny. Some of those pennies are private businesses, but that's public giving us money to do our work. So we sometimes lose track of that. All we think about is the legislature giving an increasingly smaller portion of our budget. So we start with the students here. This is an approach that we're using to revamp our entire undergraduate curriculum at Michigan State University. And like most universities, that'll take us a long time, but it's underway. We borrowed this from IBM MSU partnership. It says every student needs to have some deep knowledge in a discipline, and a deep knowledge in a system, okay? Should be able to understand many disciplines, which means having everybody loaded up with 30 and 40 credits for their major, another ton of things for a college requirement, another bunch of things for a university requirement, prevents them from having diversity in the selections of courses needed in order to understand many systems, communicate, and to develop the soft skills necessary to be successful in business world. Business world being defined very broadly. Teamwork, communication, perspective, networks, critical thinking, global understanding, budget management, outcome orientation. These are the kinds of skills, knowledges, and attitudes that will make broader impacts make sense. So we have ways that we align the undergraduate education. We have developed learning modules for them to take that prepare them to engage in communities. They can do this online. You get a certificate printout. And all of these folks have to do it. So I came into the office. We serve 7,000 students at Michigan State University through our Center for Service Learning and Civic Engagement. As you can see, last year we did 26,000. Our goal for this coming year is 30,000. Roughly 10,000 of that 26,000 is through academic service learning, which means that their service in community is directly tied to the content of their course and part of their grade. Okay? And that part of their grade is determined by the partner in the community's evaluation of their work, not the faculty members. International study abroad. All is being converted into real work experiences, not playtime when you go abroad. New partnership funded by, incidentally, National Science Foundation, between Finland and MSU, focusing on physics and chemistry. You're going to see a number of examples here related to physics. Our physics department at Michigan State University is one of the most engaged departments on our campus. They're really, truly amazing. Quantum education also involves quantum physics, students developing all kinds of products and things to enable the public to understand physics, especially quantum physics, better. We have a graduate student training program that's in its 8th cohort now. So nearly 175 graduate students have been trained through about a 32-hour free certificate program that ends up on their transcript after their oral defense. These are the 18 areas of in-course training. They also have to do a one-year community-based research project. Okay, how do we get more underrepresented groups? And boy, there's some really good examples in the first session today. So these are sort of follow-ups to that. One of the things that Michigan State University has done under Luana Simon's leadership, and then with a lot of other people doing the work, is to get out of our campus. When I came to Michigan State University, everything related to Michigan State University was on our 6,000 acres. The only exception was cooperative extension and ag bio stations. Extension was everywhere, but the university was not. Okay? So you'll see the next few slides are things, a very small sample of things that the university has created and then spun off into the community as 501c3s, and the community takes ownership of it, and then we use it, as was mentioned earlier this morning, to get faculty out there quickly into those contexts. So the Information Technology Empowerment Center is located at the community center in Lansing. It has sites in 15 schools and community-based locations. It works with mostly underrepresented populations in Lansing's metropolitan area to try to get them hooked into STEM. Getting them hooked into STEM disciplines means we have a lot of software programs that they have to create stories from. So they're called Scratch and Alice and a variety of other kind of things, mostly developed by MIT and Carnegie Mellon University. Kids get so hooked into this, we get complaints from parents that just 11:30 at night, they're still on their computers working on their programs that their stories are developing. We're like, yay, right, good. And with the help of a community partner, Dean Transportation, this $200,000 revamped bus will soon be traveling around Lansing metropolitan area to the various schools, and then eventually we'll go to Grand Rapids Public Schools, Detroit Public Schools, and Flint, are 4 key urban areas where we're expanding out to. This has 12 dual screen workstations, 3D printers, and the virtual reality headset takes them out into space where they can explore, dig things up in Mars and do wherever they want to do. Graduate students from engineering, psychology, education are primarily the instructors connected to all that kind of activity. Everything is evaluated. I'll take a little umbrage at the implication this morning that we don't know how to do evaluation. We do enormous amounts of evaluation. Here is the Power We Consortium, and it's formed into 12 coalitions based on community interest. Michigan State University, we love data. That's a good role for us in this consortium. We also invest in it a little bit, and we provide a little bit of leadership and practice, and those are the guys. All those different community entities comprise those coalitions that I just saw in various entities. My most recent doctoral student, who's on the faculty here at National Louis University, did a social network analysis of all this within each of those coalitions, across those coalitions, provided information back to the Power We Consortium leaders, and they've used that data now to say, well, why is this outlier not part of this process when they claim they're part of the coalition? What's going on there? So we could identify those kinds of network analyses and help them enhance their impact. Flint Researchers Summit, these are the coalitions we help form there. These are all on-the-ground coalitions. They come up, let me see if I can show you. The Lifeline Ceasefire. That coalition is 100% composed of parents whose teenagers have been killed in Flint. So you know what that ceasefire means now, okay? Our Department of Criminal Justice is heavily involved as a partner now with them because faculty are interested in those kinds of issues. They certainly are interested in those issues. So we bring faculty into each of these things by bringing faculty and community folks together in focus groups. We do them separately, and then we bring them together, and that stimulates lots of new grants. Our partnership with the tribal community of Michigan is all around early childhood. Weba Anung, Chippewa Ojibwa for Early Star. You don't do any work with this community, nor will you do any work with the federal agencies that fund Head Start unless you use community-based participatory research. You don't even get in the door if that's not your approach. And it has to be 100% community-based participatory research from the start of the design, selection of instruments, collection of the data, and preparation of the reports with joint publications. We train American Indian researchers to collect all the data. They continue to do it. The grant's over 3 years ago. They continue to collect that data annually because it's now a sustainable capacity for them. Send the data to us, and we like data. So we can publish from those data, working with them, even though the grant has been ended. So infrastructure for research and education. Well, we have training programs and partnerships. That was mentioned also this morning. How you initiate them, how you sustain them, and outcomes. We do these every semester we have, Michigan State, we have things called leads that initially were the president, and then it became the president and the provost, and then it became all the other executive managers. So in each of our areas of responsibility, we now have semester by semester training programs. One of ours is all around how you initiate a partnership, sustain it, and then how do you deal with the outcomes of it. Most of our work, if you really want to embed what you're talking about in terms of broader impacts, if you use these parts of this partnership strategy, that stuff's going to happen pretty naturally, the broader impacts. We focus a lot on systems. This is primarily because there's increasingly movements in the foundations, but now in federal funding agencies as well, for not wanting to fund tiny little projects that fix tiny little problems, that when the funding is over, the system that that project or program is embedded in washes all this stuff out. So efficacy trials are brilliant for saying, here are the critical variables. Once that's over and all the life comes in, all the variables that you controlled for actually work. So effectiveness trials are much more, need to be increased much more because that will enhance broader impacts. Food Plus Detroit, an entity we helped develop to become a 501c3. They have 8 community partnerships. These are run by really good, strong-willed people who really know what they need to do in order to get Detroit to be much more involved with urban agriculture. There's a lot of bad press about Detroit. Detroit's in a lot better shape than the press would lead you to believe. 2 million to 700,000 people. 60,000 structures demolished and removed. Enormous amounts of green space now available. Urban agriculture is everywhere. And they're about to try to get some laws changed so that chickens and sheep can also be there within the domains and defined boundaries of Detroit. Business is really cooking, and Michigan State University is all over that place. So is University of Michigan and Wayne State University. All 3 universities have all kinds of programs going on. So we train, go back. Whoops, go back. So Renee Wallace, the leader of Food Plus Detroit, engaged us about 3 years ago. We helped them develop their 501c3 status. We then invited her to come to a training program, 2-day training program on quantitative modeling, dynamical systems modeling, social network analysis, and agent-based modeling. These are 3 ways that people can really begin to run simulations within complex systems in order to try to determine whether the relationships within those complex systems change the way you think they're going to change, given a perturbation that you make. We're going to invest more over here with policing because crime seems to be located over there. So does that just mean crime then moves over here? Or, so all these kind of questions. Where you can run simulations and posit potential outcomes, get probability estimates. You know all this stuff by forecasting the weather, okay? So, but these are models. She brought 60 people to this conference from Detroit to get the community track training on Systems Analysis 101. There was also a quantitative track of people who actually do it. Second day, we merged them together in a day-long training on dynamical systems modeling. They're applying that in this system now in partnership with 2 of our faculty in community sustainability. Here's the model that drives the Institute for Water Research at Michigan State University. How do you get people involved and deal with some of these questions about how can faculty do these things? We did a 16-cluster hire of water folks, and there are about 10 different disciplines in those hires, and they added on to 90 people on campus who already are doing water research. That lake, some direction from here, is very important to all of us in this room, even if you're not from one of the Great Lakes states. 24% of all the world's fresh water are in those Great Lakes. So for us to invest, Madison to invest, Ohio State and Indiana, at least I know those states are the Water Coalition, makes sense. And there's no way you can study keeping the Great Lakes pure without dealing with people, because people pollute it. All right? one way or another. Could be ships that people bring in with barnacles on them. Could be people throwing carp into the river. People do it. So people have to be part of the solution. That's community engagement scholarship. That should lead to all kinds of studies of broader impacts and evaluations of outcomes. So, how do we disseminate this? Nothing was mentioned so far today about all the really wonderful examples that were presented this morning about we did this, we did that, did this. There are two sciences that need to be part of the broader impact conversation. The science of diffusion and the science of dissemination. These folks study, using science methods, whether or not the things we think we're trying to do actually work. Now, you know diffusion by don't drink during pregnancy. It was diffused everywhere in this country. But nobody went just to the women of this country and did a random sample at a clinical trial to say, well, if we did this, would you? This was a public health initiative using diffusion science to blanket the whole country, don't drink during pregnancy. Okay? Dissemination science would have done more the former. Let's look at a specific targeted population that we want to affect a change in, and then evaluate the effectiveness of that change model for that particular group. These two approaches are becoming more meshed, again, because we need to know more about are the things we're doing and investing in actually working. If you want to know what people want, go and ask them. So our Cooperative Extension Service is running 14 focus groups around the state. They will engage around 500 residents. Then they're going to have a statewide random sample survey to once again collect from people in the state of Michigan their concerns about the things that are impacting their lives. And then we'll use that information to again build back into our campus, to talk to all of our transdisciplinary research teams on campus, to invent some new ones if we have to, and push them and support them in order to deal with those issues. Media is great. That was a great presentation. Oh, he's back there. That was great on media. Rob Stevenson, a local guy, started with our WKR station, our television station, and does Curious Crew. They just got a national award for that. You can just see some examples here of Gravity. I threw that in. If you know what that is, then you need to take his course. And here's thermal energy. International Studies Program. Look at this. Research the impact, interdisciplinary team approach, local contact knowledge, field engagement, cross-cultural collaborations. That's the model that drives all of the International Studies Program research in 289 locations for our university throughout the world. Transdisciplinary, focus on complexity in science and problems, local context and uncertainty it deals with, all these kinds of things. Again, for the sake of time, I won't read that. Here, everything in here represents an entity that either was created in whole by Michigan State University or in part. MSU Business Connect, helping private sector business connect us. Nobody talked much about business. Business is part of what we do, and they have lots of partnerships. So for us, this is not just social justice, unless you think of social justice as people in the community getting jobs. There's a certain social justice for that, too. Biotechnologies, marketing and inventions to the private sector. Each of these are headed by people we hired from the community. Vice President of Pfizer and Vice President from a biotechnology company. So they're community folks who know the communities they came from, now helping us to connect the university from marketing our stuff to bringing them in. Then we throw in the same building structure in the MSU East Lansing City Technology Innovation Center, an innovation center for students, 100 students. They have a year to develop their innovative idea, and then a new 100 comes in. We have an entrepreneurial network, an undergraduate interdisciplinary bachelor's program now in entrepreneurial work. Prima Civitas was started to do local economic development. It has now worldwide connections. Business USA is actually a euphemism for our Department of Defense stuff. Now, you know, should you do this work, we have a new thing, and you probably have them at some of your institutions too, a new entity, I get the acronym, but it basically does Department of Defense research. None of it can be published. But those faculty have to be reviewed for tenure. So, work on that one, because they will earn tenure, and no one will know what they published because it's all classified information. So what are the benefits to society? Well, here's eye to eye means eye to eye. MSU Math Science Technology Enhancement System. So here's a whole bunch of programs, these coming out of these units on campus. Here's a whole bunch of things we do in outreach and engagement and support. The MSU Science Festival is aligned with the MIT Science Festival Alliance. Gifted and Talented Education comes out of our unit. State Science Olympiad statewide championships are a program called Head Start on Science, which is actually NSF funded. Our College of Engineering has its annual design day. Used to be only mechanical engineering. The whole college now does it. They have about 35 businesses that give them $3,500 each. So they got $100,000 some dollars. They all go out to prizes. After the competitions in the morning, well, they're actually all year. After the award's done, the whole afternoon is high school kids coming in to work with the graduate students around these projects. And then Quest, I think I mentioned before. And then here's the community partners. And so we're always looking at these programs, connecting them over here to lots of schools. Science Olympiad is a statewide organization, and there's our local sponsors and national sponsors. What the students do is improve a product. So I have a business, I have a product, I give it to them, they got a year to improve it, and then I get it all back. I pay $3,500 for that. So that's pretty cool. Science Festival. First year we did this, we had 10,000. Last year we had 25,000 come onto the campus. We also partner with the Michigan Science Institute in Detroit. And we do Science in the City, where we have what you saw earlier today as a science cafe. So Science in the City for this is a whole bunch of science cafes. So we learned about each other's capacities and limitations by using community-based participatory research as an approach to engaging people in the community. They have to have a voice in solving their problems. We bring good science methodologies, good research evaluation understandings and tools, good instruments that we can use to assess things. They live with the problems. How do we bring those two knowledges together to co-create solutions that will generate scholarship for me and generate good, sustainable changes in the issues that and the programs and practices that they have to live with? There's a movement now, there are 1,100 cities in the world that are now learning regions or learning cities. This is an effort that was started by the UNESCO. By the way, the worldwide piece of this, UNESCO Committee on Community-Based Research and Social Responsibility for Higher Education is in its third year now. This is indeed, as was mentioned, a worldwide movement, no question about it. The heads of that are Bud Hall at the University of Victoria and Rajesh Tandon from Priya in India. So, learning regions and learning communities. What is it that community engagement scholarship, what is it that the universities of the world bring to this conversation of how do we make transformational change and teach this guy how to hit the right button? How do we make transformational changes in cities and regions, especially regions? We bring the idea that we have to co-create knowledge, that we have to have data to drive our decision making. We can't just flip coins and use political expediency to fund things anymore. We have to have information. We have to have impact metrics. And as was mentioned, at the systems level, this is a toughie, but there are a lot of people working on it. We have to focus on scholarship of discovery, generate new knowledge, new approaches, new tactics that are evidence-based and data. We have to have scale-up applications that work. And then pretty much the rest of that matches up. And we are evidence-based. These tend to be place-based. We want authentic partnerships. These tend to work on individuals and organizational learning. So we bring something to the table that isn't implicit in this worldwide effort. So we co-create knowledge. We sustain for sustainable transfer of knowledge. True empowerment approaches to community. If any of you who are as old as I am remember growing up in the 60s and 70s, empowerment was a big issue. It generally didn't go anywhere. These are true empowerment because the people in the community are working side by side with other people who live in communities who happen to work at institutions of higher education. Create mutually beneficial outcomes, public support for solution focused. I can't tell you how vehement our partners are in the community in expressing their satisfaction and their support of Michigan State University when these programs prove to be successful. And they are strong advocates to us with their local legislators. Potentially involves impacts, potentially the whole community through diffusion or dissemination, transdisciplinary partnerships, startup companies, improvements, innovations, workforce development. That's all part of what we do. And we have to use good implementation of fidelity when we try to leverage programs to a bigger spread of effect. Enhances our reliability and validity. And it encourages us to think more deeply about diffusion and dissemination. So that's Community Engagement Scholarship's mission or breadth, and ways that I think it automatically layers onto the broader impact conversation that was started this morning and has been around for the last 3 years. I think translational science, we give the same kind of training programs to our translational science medical faculty and their programs. Here's all the references, and as was mentioned, there are about 15 more slides. And oh yes, how many administrators are here? I have 80 people that work for me. That's infrastructure support. Okay, so my Office of Outreach and Engagement has 80 people of various kinds of things, all committed to helping 4,750 faculty and academic tenure and non-tenure stream faculty with their efforts in community to do community-based scholarly work. 3,700 of them are doing it, and they're in our database. We hire public anthropologists, public sociologists, community psychologists, public sociologists, agricultural sociologists. We hire people, and you do too, who we expect to do their work somewhere off our campus. Why would we not have reward systems in place to support them? That makes no sense to me. But a number of things don't. So that's it. Thanks.
So pretty difficult to take 12 years of experience building that infrastructure and get that into 45 minutes. We'd love to have about 10 minutes worth of your questions, and then we're going to have an activity at your table, individually and at your table, to help with some integration of what happened this morning. So I'll come around with the microphone to folks who have questions for
Yeah, and
Dr.
I
Fitzgerald.
apologize, I have to get on a plane because I have a early childhood meeting at the High Scope Foundation tomorrow. So
And one thing
I
that
still do baby stuff.
the babies are waiting for you. One thing that I mentioned throughout, and I mentioned as well, is the Engagement Scholarship Consortium. This is an institutional member organization that's in place internationally for institutions to join for what I consider a very low fee, to be able to be part of shaping the culture around engagement scholarship and to receive all the resources that go with it. There, in fact, at ISU alone, there are at least 6 people I know of who have been part of the Emerging Scholars program there. Another, probably 2 or 3 who have been part of the staff workshops that have really helped people, they tell me, get tenure and promotion or just promotion as a staff member and other resources as well. So I will put this back on the table with the other resources related to that conference.
Yeah, there's infographics here too that I think there's a copy of back there.
Yeah,
somewhere.
APL, you created that.
We were asked to put in infographics. The question that was asked to us by the Council of Engagement and Outreach of the Association of Public Land Grant Universities was, so 1999 returned to our roots, which was focused on public institutions, a little bit on land grants, but it was really intended for all public institutions in the country. Which means coming back into engaging communities in the kind of work that would enhance community outcomes, deal with all the problems of society, and I mean all of them. So economic problems, agricultural problems, neighborhood problems, school problems, you name it. These are all complex systems and complex problems. So what's changed? So Laurie Van Egeren, who's the assistant provost in my shop for University Community Partnerships, put together all this stuff. These are all fuzzy numbers like any kind of infographics where you're trying to search web pages and universities and all those things, but they're pretty dramatic, fuzzy stuff. So in 1999, there were 12 networks or organizations dealing with the kinds of things we're talking about. Today, there are 47. Almost every higher education organization in this country now is talking about these. And most of you probably get all that stuff on your emails because your institutions belong to all those things. But there are 47 of them now. There were 13 journals, not counting disciplinary journals, where most engaged scholarship is published. But if you just count the ones that focus on outreach and engagement kind of stuff, there were 13. There are now 39 journals. Okay? Some of those are peer-reviewed and pretty rigorous. Some of those are open source. That's fine. But there's 39 of them now. 12 award kinds of things given out, not including your institutional kinds of awards. There are now 44 of them. So in 10 years or 12 years from that 1999 challenge to higher education, a lot has changed. So this is available. Sorry, is there a question? Keep my mouth shut. Yes.
I'm Kathy Moore from Oakland University, which started as a branch of Michigan State.
It did.
I guess my question is, have the faculty, and since you're an associate provost, I assume you have some role in the tenure decisions that are being made. Are the faculty involved in engaged scholarship, making good cases for their tenure? Are they being successful?
Right. Those 3,700 people are faculty.
Yes, I know.
2,000 of them are tenured.
Okay.
The rest are fixed term, which in our place means you're there forever. So, yes, the points of distinction was developed by a faculty group in 1996. So in 1996, that document that's in the points of distinction became the document that goes out to all the chairs and directors every year on a P&T process. Okay, so faculty went from listing the numbers of things they do to having to write 5-page single-space in most cases, answers to those questions. What's the significance of my work? What's the meaning of it? Other than I published 5 papers. Who cares whether you publish 5 papers? If it has no meaning to anybody, is our position at the university. So that doesn't mean to say that once our cyclotron is done and they blast one of those little buggers and something happens and nobody knows, that we're going to say, okay, well, we don't want the cyclotron anymore. We do. But it has to have some meaning and significance. What's the context within which you've done that work? What's its numbers? Scholarship is in there. It's one of the categories. And what's its impact? It's the 4th characteristic in the points of distinction. What's the impact? For whom? The problem is that 3 of the 4 people hired in 1967 when I was hired got their tenure and ran out of ideas and spent the whole rest of their careers at a major research university not doing research. So we get into things like post-tenure review and all these things to read why that doesn't work. When people stop doing research, they're done, is at least my experience. If you have to think about where you're going, and then the institution can provide the resources to help you get there, you got a better shot of keeping people active, curious, all the kinds of characteristics that are necessary to continue to drive their research. And by the way, I'm 75% in the Provost's office, 25% in the Department of Psychology, by my choice. I would not take a 100% administrative position. You have to see, I mean, that's, again, you have to provide the infrastructure support, and you have to get people engaged in thinking about where they're going and what they're doing. And that's not just when you're an assistant professor coming in and going for a job. The associate professor, you're going up for full, why should we continue to employ you? Where are you going? What are you thinking about? How can we help you get, if you're making a switch on sort of your topics and things? So it's all providing that kind of support. I am not directly involved in the review of P&T, again, by choice. That would take entirely too much time. Yes, Michael.
Hi, Hiram. I've talked to Lori before, but you said 80 people, and so I've been asking, I tried to ask Lori this question, and I'm going to ask you, right? That's a huge infrastructure, which I'm not sure about a lot of you, but that almost seems impossible. So I'm going to ask you, how did you begin to develop that infrastructure? If you could provide some guidance or insight.
So I was told when I accepted the job, basically, if I can remember the quote, hi, take this applied developmental science and put it all over this campus. Just the way that we want international to be on the tip of the tongue of every faculty member. Doesn't mean everyone's going to do it. It just means we're trying to align the institution to it. So I had 7 when I started, people. And a couple of them didn't really get involved with the on-the-ground kind of stuff because they were sort of administrative support folks. So in 2002, I had 7 people. We started, and we had 2 units, University Community Partnerships and Administration, 3 units, and Communication and Information Technology. That was the biggest group of that 7. And their job was to provide the web pages for the university that provided access to the university from anybody in the world around domains of research at the university. That's called statewide.com. And then all the programs for pre-college that involve children and stuff on campus. That's called Spartan Youth Programs. So they do all the web pages on that and the annual work to make sure those web pages are always up to date. Okay? That's the biggest group that I have still, but there are about 15 people in it. Graphic artists, computer programmers, communications. We don't have marketing. We do have communication. Design people and copy editors, because we produce a lot of published material as well. We don't have an obligation to get any money. I mean, that was not part of our mission. We're a support unit for the faculty, so we weren't really charged to generate external dollars, but we do, because I couldn't imagine not doing that, given what our office is supposed to do. So as we began to do that, we just grew and grew and grew. Somebody came up with an idea, said we should have a Center for Community Evaluation and Research. Great idea, so we have that now. Somebody said we should have a lab that actually does experiments on usability and accessibility of web pages. We have that now. So we just kept growing those things and giving proposals to the provost and the president. She was the same for a while, or she was the same person in two different roles for a while. And they kept saying, great idea, how much? And we would get them. The Usability Accessibility Lab was $500,000, so we got that. We generate about $350,000 a year in state evaluation contracts. Our state has outsourced all of its evaluations into the Michigan Public Health Institute, but there are other ones. So a number of our people, including Laurie, has a big statewide evaluation that she does on 21st century learning schools for 10 years. Laurie Van Egren, who is my assistant provost, in the time she's been in that job, which is about 9 years, $20 million of external funding, mostly from federal agencies for stuff. We've submitted $30 million worth of funds, and we've gotten $25 million in the time I've been associate provost from various places to do various things. And I require all my staff to publish. Not the way faculty publish, but they have to publish, they have to have a contract or a grant, or why would a faculty member believe that they know what they're talking about? So we set up a scholarship model to run a scholarship support entity. That's how we grew. I was always accused of being an empire builder in the Department of Psychology too. So
We have time for one more question, and then we're going to move on to our activity.
I think the point is, though, we had an institution that was ready to support and back up what it said was of value to them. However big or small we may have grown.
I'm Jason Dedrick from Syracuse University over here. My question is, do you have any evidence in terms of how your focus on engaged scholarship affects your ability to recruit junior faculty, whether they see it as another burden and an already kind of burdened life, or if they see it as an advantage, or
I think the point was made in the early session, and I'll just reiterate it. You're from Syracuse?
Yeah.
You know Tim Eaton? Eatman?
Tim Eaton.
Imagining America?
No.
Out of Syracuse, you should know him. He's the president of Imagining America?
Co-director with Scott Peters of Imagine America.
Yeah. So when you get back, look him up.
All right.
What was your question?
I can share a few things. What I have in your packet is the research I've done on what faculty think of engagement scholarship. Right. And they pretty much have said what our panel said earlier. It gets more money. It actually gets me more publications. It makes me ask better research questions. It helps me be a better citizen. It helps me be a better person. And it's making me stay at my university because I feel that my work is supported by the community as well as the university. You've probably seen other things.
Yeah, you specifically asked about new faculty.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Faculty of color, absolutely important. For various disciplinary units versus maybe some others, critically important because many of the students, many of the job applicants have already gone through service learning in high school. They've done it in college. They have a real commitment to making their science, however, or their creative activities really work. There's no question about it. And if we did not have the support structures that we have in place, we would lose a great many more faculty of color, given where we are we're not a big urban kind of area with a lot of persons of color living in our 450,000 catchment area. So all of our placements and our place developments are in those areas, and a great many of those faculty are doing their research in those communities and stuff. Absolutely critical, and they're expecting it.
So we're going to go ahead and move on to our next activity. Thank you, Hi, for sharing all of that great work at Michigan State. And it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Beate Schmittmann. She is the Dean of Liberal Arts and Sciences at Iowa State University and a physicist, as well as a co-PI on the grant that is sponsoring this conference.
Well, thank you very much, Nancy and Hi. So we've talked about engagement here all morning. So we want to get you a little bit more engaged with the material that you've heard us talk about here all morning. So first thing I would like you to do is find the one colored sheet in your package.
On the right-hand side.
It's on the right-hand side. It's kind of a beige color. It's not very easy to see in this lighting, but I would like you to find that. Okay? All right. We're going to go through an interactive process now in 3 parts. The first part is actually that you look at the sheet, the front, where it says Part 1, and you're going to do something on your own. You've heard us talk a lot about the benefits of engaged scholarship. You've heard some people here in the room ask some skeptical questions about, how do faculty respond, how does it work in P&T, et cetera. And we want you to think about the top 3 benefits that you see personally and the top 3 barriers that you see personally. Think about your unit. If you're a faculty member, a department chair, think about your department. If you're a provost, think about your campus. Okay, so that's the first thing I want you to do, and you're already all working on it. So I'll let you do that first, and then after that, I'm actually going to move people around so that every table has about 6 or 7 people, because we're then going to repeat this at the table level. So take a few minutes, work on it on your own, write legibly, because we would like to collect these sheets at the end and possibly use them for data collection. Any questions? Everybody understand what we're asking you to do? Okay, you're great. Okay, I'm going to call this 1 minute. Are we ready to come back together? So I'm going to wander from table to table with a microphone. I'm the person between you and lunch, so keep it brief. And I'm going to ask each table to report on just one thing. So you pick your top benefit or you pick your top barrier and talk to us about it. And Nancy's actually going to take some notes, so we'll have that material available, and we'll try to put a summary up on our webpage over the next few days. So I'm going to start over here with the table in the front. Who is going to speak?
Okay. So I guess we're kind of sharing our barriers and benefits. And so I'm just going to ask my table behind me here to jump in if I miss anything or misconstrue it. But I guess we sort of summarized our benefits around the notion that enhanced engagement really gives you a lot more credibility in many ways. Credibility in the things that the work itself, credibility in the individual researcher, and credibility in the unit that results in those increased invitations for speaking engagements and maybe collaborations. So while that's clearly valued in increasing the attention to the work, it's not necessarily valued when it comes to the P&T process, and people then don't see that that should contribute to your progress. So on the one hand, on the larger scheme of things, we see a benefit as that enhanced credibility, but that enhanced credibility has to be valued when it comes to implementation and in how you capture that in individuals' movement through the P&T process. Did I get that right?
Great, great model. Now we keep going.
Okay, so we're a table of public universities, and we said one enormous benefit is on the public view of the university writ large. Is the university relevant? Is it visible? Students who engage in these activities bring those stories not only into the communities they serve, but to their families, their friends, etc. That, again, changes the view of the university and changes the students' view of the faculty. So we thought that was fairly critical. Another key issue is enhancing the faculty members' growth as intellectuals and scholars and their sense of value. Lisa pointed out there's a feedback loop in terms of engaged research. You learn things from the communities you're serving, and that can affect your scholarship as well. As barriers, felt barrier number one perhaps was this sort of traditional focus on independence in academic training and in our incentive systems. I'm a vice provost for academic affairs, and I am constantly having this battle with my committee on academic personnel, who advises me, and it's independence, independence, independence. I have to point out to them, that word came out of our academic personnel manual 15 years ago, folks. It is no longer a criterion for evaluating scholarship. We feel a huge issue is the resources, though, in terms of a barrier. We've just seen an archetypal example of a university that has dived in whole body into this commitment, and that represents an enormous financial commitment by Michigan State. And I think, but if you're going to ask faculty, students to do this, in addition to the other work they're doing, you've got to provide resources, support systems, programs for them.
Okay, who is speaking here? Dawn?
Okay, just very briefly, and my colleagues I'm sure will jump in. One of the benefits we identified was making broader impacts and engaged scholarship makes a stronger case for public investment in education as a public good. And we had different iterations of that theme, but this visibility and engagement with the public we thought was important. And one of the barriers was time. This is very time-intensive work, and is the time that the faculty member devotes to it really valued by the institution?
Okay, very good. Thank you.
We identified, in addition to some of the previous themes, a real focus around involving the public and helping to educate them around the value of the scientific enterprise, to help inform them to be more critical consumers, like the example we saw before, maybe about climate change, other policy-related issues, and all of that that it implies in terms of coming along with that. And I felt that there was a growing sense of obligation among the academic community to take a more active and involved role in that process that for many, I guess, years or maybe even decades, we've just assumed that it was happening naturally, and that really no longer seems to be the case. Second benefit, we focus very much on the undergraduate and graduate students, and in promoting the value of their civic engagement and participation in the communities, whether they go on as future faculty and researchers or whatever career path they choose. We talked a lot about the benefit to them and about the benefit of providing a strategic focus to the extent possible for all of the divergent work that they might already be doing in the community. We heard a little bit about some increased funding and engagement in terms of a benefit, but we recognize again the level of administration buy-in and commitment is really the number one barrier, and even just beyond financial commitment, just even the articulation of this as an institutional or organizational value can often create a cascade of support and activity. Of course, dollars make a big difference too. And we had a very interesting, we have a very strong representation at the table from land-grant universities here. And those of us from private universities were interested in the distinction and sort of the benefits and trade-offs with having an extension unit associated with the university. The legacy of that's their problem, not our problem, is very foreign to private university because we don't have that issue. But we also, on the other hand, don't have the benefit of extension in the funding. And so we talked a lot about the mixed blessing, if you will, of public university, land-grant universities, and their extension.
Thank you very much. We'll keep it moving. Give us one benefit, one barrier. All right? Thank you.
One of the benefits that was brought to our table was thinking about engaged scholarship as a very effective approach to align teaching, research, and service responsibilities for faculty.
Thank you. Who's speaking here?
I suppose I am. We're supposed to give a benefit and one barrier. We kind of had a mixture of types of universities, I guess, institutions here at our table. The first benefit that we talked about really was increasing through engaged scholarship, what we called inclusive excellence. And some of that involves whether it be the diversity and all levels of diversity and thought through the community and working with the community and helping people to solve real problems. That's just some of it. A barrier was aligning the infrastructure and culture with all levels of the institution and external communities, and also decreasing the silos. So there's several different parts that can be unpacked there. And we were just trying to get it all in, which we actually ran out of time before we even got through all of this. But thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. We talked about many of the issues that have already been brought up. I'll just highlight one of the benefits that we identified is to undergraduate students, both through seeing their faculty members engaged in engaged scholarship and potentially participating in that engaged scholarship and developing a deeper understanding of their course of study through seeing its applications in the world. And we talked so much about benefits, we didn't get through all the barriers, but I'll throw out one that I haven't heard yet. And that's just a lack of understanding around what we mean by engaged scholarship.
Very good. And last but definitely not the least table.
Perhaps the least original, since we are going last. But one thing that hasn't really been identified that surfaced as one of the biggest benefits at our table was the symbiotic relationships that emerge from co-creating or co-producing knowledge with the campus and the community. And as far as barriers go, obviously the infrastructure that's been addressed, and particularly there's a need for training of faculty because this type of work really takes them outside of their wheelhouse, and also support to both build and sustain the partnerships that are necessary.
Well, thank you all very much. If you would take a moment and just put your sheets at the center of the table, we'll pick them up. I hope you enjoyed the opportunity to start conversations at your tables. You'll have many more opportunities during the course of the workshop. If you haven't finished talking, grab some lunch, come back, and then we reconvene the session this afternoon. Thank you very much, and let's thank all of our speakers and panelists and participants.